The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending this IACET Town Hall on the review of IACET's proposed bylaws changes. It's nice to have each of you here today. If you can hear me and you have audio, could you raise your hand by clicking the little hand on the applet that you have in front of you? Excellent. I see most of you responding affirmatively. Thank you for doing that. You can put those hands down now, and we do have great audio. We appreciate all of you coming in today to learn more about the IACET policies and procedures. Our webinar will start in about 30 seconds to a minute. We have about a month ago, we had initiated the 29th, the board was 29th of March, the board approved changes to the bylaws, but those changes have to be approved by the IACET membership, which requires a vote. Those shortly after that meeting, there was 30 days notice, actually a little bit more than that, I believe, to expose those changes. Those notices were posted on IACET's website, social media accounts, and newsletters, and it contained links to the red line versions of the bylaws, policies, and procedures, as well as the clean versions. And as the board of directors approved those, it is now time to expose or to have this meeting to fully inform, answer any questions that may exist about those bylaws. And we're fortunate to have our executive committee here, along with several board members on the line with us today. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at quickly our agenda for this afternoon. Peter's going to welcome us in just a moment, and then we're going to have Secretary Sumi Deal's overview of the bylaws changes. We will also have all executive committee members are here ready to answer your questions. The executive committee was also several members of the Bylaws, Policies, and Procedures Committee, and those members have spent months working on these changes and providing a vision for the association in moving forward. Right after the questions, we anticipate answering the questions that we have come in. After that, we'll provide immediate instructions for voting here in GoToWebinar. And then after that, immediately simultaneously, you'll also be receiving an email with additional instructions should you, for other members who could not make the webinar today, you'll be able to get instructions on how to vote for those, on whether or not those changes should continue. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin today's webinar. I'd like to turn it over to Peter Finn. He's IACET's chairman, and he's the deputy director at the Society of Women Engineers, as well as the chief learning officer. Peter?
Thanks, Joe. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for being with us on this Thursday afternoon to talk about some of the bylaws and policies and procedures changes. As Joe had noted, we recently voted in March. We had a majority consensus on approving the bylaws changes and the policies and procedures changes. And this has been several months in the making. Back in September, when we had a board meeting last year, we had started the discussion about making some structural changes to our governance, which will require some bylaws changes and also within the policies and procedures. So we formed a task force to go through this, and Sumi, as secretary, kind of led the charge with a lot of this. And I want to thank everyone that was involved in this process, not only the board, of course, but the folks that really did a lot of the heavy lifting, and that was Andrew Kauser, Leah Jansen, and Sumi. Deal. So it was a lot of calls, a lot of work, and I also want to acknowledge the work of staff. Joe and his team were there every step of the way and helping coordinate the meetings and so on. We also worked with a parliamentarian and also with an attorney to make sure that the changes that we were making were really in within the best practices of good governance. So really amazing team that we put together and putting this together. And as Joe had noted, we'll have some instructions at the end of the webinar to do some voting on this. But I've been on the the board since 2012. And, I think really a lot of the rationale here is what has gotten us here is maybe not going to get us to the next step and how we want to grow IACET. So there were really some fundamental changes that needed to be made, and that impacts the bylaws and the policies and procedures. So that's what kind of pushed this, our strategic plan and making sure that we can better position IACET for the future. So I'm going to hand it off to Sumi, who's going as secretary and has really led a lot of this effort. Let her go over some of this with all of you, and thanks again for being here with us.
Great, thanks, Peter, and thanks, Joe. So as Peter mentioned in his introduction, our focus in approaching these bylaws changes was really to see how we could best position IACET for the coming years. We're growing, our services that we're offering are growing, our client base is growing, and so we felt like there are some internal changes that we needed to put in place to support that growth and make sure that we could continue to provide the support that we do for our members and our clients. And so the letter that Joe has on the screen explains in somewhat detail the steps that we went through and the things that we focused on. But I just want to give you an overview today of the two primary things that we really tried to keep our focus on. And one is the governance model that's there at the bottom of the screen. And the second was the membership types and groups that we wanted to make sure were appropriate for the services and things that we were offering. So in the governance model, our goal was to really make sure that we had some hierarchy built into the governance model so that there was one clear group that was responsible for decisions and responsible for how we conduct business among the groups within the larger IACET organization. So the goal was to really position the board of directors as the clear and practical head of the organization so that any concerns or issues among the groups, such as the commission or council or other work groups within IACET, had one clear place to go to get resolution. So our members clearly understood that we have one governing body that manages our direction. And then the second piece that we focused on was membership eligibility and what types of members we have and the recruitment process around that. We did add some new member types and change the title of a couple of existing member types. And I know there were some of the questions that came in around that, or a couple of the questions that we received asked about these additional member types. So we will get into that in a little bit. But the idea was to really offer a way for some of our clients who don't necessarily need to be full-blown members, but still have enough interest in the industry to stay in touch with what we're doing, what best practices are, and to participate in some work groups or things like that without having to go through the full application process and become authorized providers to be able to participate. And so that was the bigger driver for creating that membership type, was for that scenario that I explained. And so we talked through that a little bit in terms of voting rights and eligibility. And so some I know there were some adjustments made, and we'll touch on those when we go through the questions. So if I could go back to the governing structure for just a second, the diagram that's on the screen now that Joe pulled up shows as we're growing, we're adding different lines, if you will, almost lines of business that we're supporting with respect to natural gas, PNG, or the ODB efforts that we've been doing. So we're hoping with this new governance structure that we've built it in a way that we can scale this as we need to with other initiatives that might require work groups or standard committees or their own commission, because the applications have been tailored for specific reasons. And so we do have our Council on Standard Development that will still kind of own and oversee the ANSI development for all standards, whatever falls underneath that. So we still have that centralized view of our primary standard that we hold and will hold our providers to. So we didn't want to take that away in any shape or form. So I'm going to make a call here for questions from anybody that's on the phone. Feel free to let us know if you have a question, and I think I'm going to turn it back over to Joe, who's going to help us address some of the questions that come up.
Thank you, Sumi. We have just a few questions that have been submitted in advance, and we'll just go ahead and start with them if that's all right. We have a question from Ann Scott. Ann Scott says this: under the new bylaws, site reviewers shall have 3-year terms. Will IACET replace all current commissioners with new site reviewers, or will commissioners who are not due to rotate off this year continue as site reviewers to ensure some continuity in the reaccreditation process?
This is Andrew Kaiser, and I don't know who wants to take this, but I'm happy to. The site reviewers, or rather the current commissioners that are not their terms are not expiring past September 30th, will remain and be site reviewers. And if those terms that do expire, what we've done is institute term limits, and we've done that across the organization for the board as well as commissioners. If your term ends and you've exceeded the term limit, then you will roll off. But if you do not term out, or if you have not exceeded the term limit, then you would remain as a site reviewer. I hope I answered that correctly.
Very good. I think that does, certainly. So essentially for those commissioners, just to summarize what Andrew had said, and Andrew, we have just maybe a little bit of problem hearing. So I'll just kind of restate very quickly. Andrew said that any commissioner who is not expiring at the end of this term, who has extensions on into 2020 and 21, will continue to be available to be a site visitor. So that would be, and then obviously term limits would kick in as is indicated in the new policies and procedures. Andrew, did I summarize that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay. All right. So that's one question. Yes, and very good. Thank you, Andrew. Let's move to the next question from Mary Ellen Habel. She submitted this in advance. She says this: please further explain the reason for the changes in membership. And I'm assuming what she means there is the differences between the, for example, individual member versus the associate member. Also, obviously, we have the full accredited provider versus the non-accredited organizational member, which we would now call the associate membership. So Mary Ellen says to please further explain the reason for the changes in the membership. What is the incentive to pay to be an individual member? It appears that commissioners will not be able to be individual members unless they forgo honorariums. So what is the incentive for an individual member to join IACET?
So Joe, this is Sumi. I can help address that one. So as I mentioned in the overview kind of what our approach was and what we did, the idea behind creating this new membership type was to really allow those in our training industry or outside of the industry who are very closely tied to training and want to know the things we're involved in and what we're doing, but don't necessarily need a full accredited provider status. This gives them that opportunity to still stay engaged with us to the extent that they want to provide us some guidance on their industries and what they're doing and what their expectations are. We're also hoping that they'll join our events and talk about our events and receive some member benefits in that way. And we hope to, in return for their membership and support, provide some discounts for them on these events and things. And so it's kind of a nice interim membership level that we hope will benefit some of our colleagues.
All right. Any additional executive committee members that would like to, while you're preparing, we'll be ready for any additional questions as well. If you don't want to voice those out loud, you're welcome to place those questions in your GoToMeeting applet or GoToWebinar applet there. Just type those in and we will get right to those questions. While we're waiting for some additional questions to come in, I'd like to introduce to you as well our executive committee members that are on the line. I think Jim Barnes, CEO of Global OSHA, is on the line. You've already heard from Andrew Kauser. Andrew Kauser is an industrial training expert, and he's on our executive committee. And then Dr. Leah Jansen from Continue Ed. She is on our executive committee as well as Carol Martsolf. She is the chair of the Council on Standards Development. And Mr. John Spittler is also our commission chair this year. They would, I think they're on the line today with us. But nonetheless, back to Sumi. Sumi, is there any additional thoughts from any of the additional or any other executive committee members on the policies or the bylaws changes that were being made, and a little bit more maybe around your rationale for supporting them over the following of the last few months?
This is Andrew, and I just wanted to add a little bit more color to the membership changes, because we certainly wanted to allow for individual members as well to have full voting rights, and create an individual associate member that was available, that mimicked the associate membership for a corporation, basically, that may want access to IACET but not have voting rights. And that was really truly to support the guidance that we received around any potential conflict of interest in so far as having compensated members also having voting rights. So we've created a separate mechanism to support that in the individual membership, having either an individual member or an individual associate membership level.
All right.
This is Dr. Leah Jansen, and I'll add to what Peter, Andrew, and Sumi and all have said, and that is that when we looked at all of these pieces and parts, we really were thinking strategically to support long-term growth of the organization, so that we're supporting other industries like natural gas, where there may be more restrictions and more requirements in terms of training, and that we're meeting the needs of those individual industries and can look to grow in other industries down the line that may have some of those additional requirements. So the lens we wore the whole time was looking at strategic growth of the organization over time.
Yeah, and the final comment I would add, I agree with everything Leah just said, and I think when we think about, ultimately it's our customers and our clients and our APs and the industries that we serve that are the most important. And I believe the governance structure we're proposing and the changes we're proposing will allow us to provide a very consistent experience for our clients, which I think is really important.
Thank you very much. We had sent out an email a couple weeks ago now that outlined essentially said that this webinar would answer several questions, and we've been seeking to do that with our executive committee, with our secretary, Sumi Deal, with our chairman, Peter Finn, and we're coming down to the last few minutes to be able to ask questions. One of the things that the emails last week sent, that we had expressed last week, that we would talk about new products, new services that would be offered should these changes manifest themselves and be approved by the membership. And essentially what that meant was, as IACET, right now, for example, IACET's rolling out the Open Digital Badge Standard. We've already had 2 successful Open Digital Badge Experience events, one in Chicago, one in Herndon. And the problem is we don't have any substantive governance for those programs. The petroleum and natural gas industry has very little governance. While we have policies and procedures around the Petroleum and Natural Gas Advisory Board, we don't have any governance around how a consensus body would work for submitting a standard. We don't have a formal body for creating an accreditation commission that would accredit against that petroleum and natural gas standard. And this new governance structure will essentially allow IACET to be able to govern those different programs effectively and, most importantly, modularly. As you can see, the goal over time, and as it has been for the last 4 years at IACET, was to engage our advisory boards, to create new advisory boards. We've created already 2, an engineering advisory board, an oil and gas advisory board for some of the major verticals that IACET serves. In the future, IACET is currently looking at a construction industry safety advisory board, also a health services, healthcare advisory board, as those are other substantive verticals that IACET serves. But in order to be able to, we want to be able to receive, and we want to be able to activate and create programs and services and products that serve those different verticals as IACET engages with them, and to be able to govern that. These bylaws would enable a far better, more flexible, agile, modular governance structure than anything that has been in the past. And it's all good. It's due to the IACET's growth. It's due to the interest in the things and the mission that IACET has. So we're happy about that and those changes. Well, you've been online today with our executive committee, and we're happy that all of them came. We won't beleaguer the changes any longer. So if you have changes, we have about 15 seconds. I'm going to talk now just a little bit about how you can vote. If you look to your chat area to vote, if you'd like to vote right now and you are an eligible member to be able to vote, you're welcome to do so. You can go to vote at the link provided. Just complete the form and you can vote there. And you can vote on whether you would like to support and approve the changes to the bylaws or not. You can also get links to copies, both a red line and a clean version. You're welcome to examine those, think those over. Of course, if questions arise, if you have questions on an ongoing basis or would like to discuss those more, I'm sure we have executive committee members who'd be happy to correspond with you over any additional questions that you may have about those. Voting will last for about 2 weeks. So we have about 2 weeks from today. The voting will remain open. And right after this message, we'll be sending, you may get a duplicate message that will say, please go vote. You're an eligible member. If you do, and you've already voted, you don't have to worry about that, obviously. But nonetheless, all the other members who weren't able to attend today will be receiving that shortly after. So without further ado, any additional questions or any additional comments from members of our executive committee before I turn it back to Peter? All right, with that, Peter.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everyone. Again, thanks, everyone, for joining us today. If questions do arise later, feel free to contact us. Yeah, I just want to thank all of the staff and the board and everyone that was able to join us on the call today. And have a great Memorial Day weekend. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.